Tepu, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasank Ma Keperu with another video for you. And in this video, we're going to talk about NASA and the search for extraterrestrial life. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button located at the bottom here. And if it's your first time to my channel, welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of when I go live or when I upload new videos. Also, share this video with family and friends so we can get this revolution started. Lastly, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can do so for as little as $1 or $5 per month, and you get exclusive access to instructional videos on the esoteric. Videos such as how to work with tarot cards, how to meditate, how to do proper breathing to be at peace and at rest, how to create a magical amulet, how to summon spirits to help you in your endeavors. So those videos are great. Right now we're doing an awesome I Ching class, which is the Chinese oracle. So take advantage of that. Become a Patreon supporter, like I said, for just $1 or $5 per month. So let's get into this topic of discussion, which is a very, very important topic. In this, we're going to talk about NASA and the search for extraterrestrial life. This is very, very important, probably one of the most important videos I have made to date. And you'll soon discover. One thing that you'll have to understand as a magi, as a priest, as an occultist, I am duty bound not to say too much for a couple of reasons. Number one, in ancient Kemet, the masses of the population weren't privy to the inner circle, the workings of the inner circle of the priesthood, because they didn't need to know all of the priesthood's secrets and how things are done. So I'm like on the other side here, behind the curtain, doing everything, but a lot of people are not ready for the real deep information. So I can't take a deep dive into things because you're still initiates. So I have to kind of spoon feed it in a way. The other reason is when you start talking about the real deep stuff, then you become a target of the ruling elite, and then they tend to have people disappear. So those are the two reasons. But what I like to do is put out as much information as possible so that you can absorb it. Because when I got into this, I went full steam ahead researching, buying books, traveling the country, learning with different gurus and masters and sages. And it got to a point where I became awakened to the realization of my true nature and what's going on in reality. And it was very shocking to me, and I couldn't handle it. So I just want to make sure that all of you magi's, initiates, are dissecting the information in a way that doesn't shock your system. Because sometimes when it hits you so hard, there could be a rejection of the information, a rejection of the truth. Because sometimes, as I said in the Matrix, it's better to live in ignorance, you know? So just be cognizant of that fact that there are more esoteric secrets and deeper things that I'm not revealing, and it's for everyone's good and safety. But let's talk about NASA. You know, now NASA as an institution, whether you realize it or not, is not what you see in mainstream media and in Hollywood. You see, NASA pumps its propaganda through Hollywood. They work in conjunction to paint this really great image of NASA as this entity that's all about space exploration, about discoveries, about looking for extraterrestrial life, when in reality, NASA is an institution that was primarily put together to dispense false information, false and misleading information. You see, in fact, NASA's history has been very shady. In the early beginnings of its origin, many of its members came directly out of the Nazi party, the Nazi Germany party. You see, when Germany lost the war, many of the scientists sought refuge in the United States, and they got sanctuary. So it was actually the Vatican that took them in. And then NASA then worked with them to help build rockets. And one of the chief scientists was Werner von Braun, who pioneered rocket science. and he worked exclusively with NASA to help us get to the moon. So you see NASA's history is very shady in terms of who they worked with. Now, of course, these Nazi scientists should have been put on trial for war crimes because we know the atrocities that they committed against the Jews. But because their knowledge and technology at that point in time was such of a high value to NASA, we basically said, hey, we're going to grant you clemency, come over here, you know, and this is done through the Vatican. So you can research this. It's called Operation Paperclip, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how the Vatican plays into this. Now, this stuff that you're seeing in mainstream media about NASA has been painted to give you this type of narrative. And the narrative is we're exploring the stars. We want to put a man on Mars or a man or woman on Mars. We've already put a man on the moon. Now let's understand something. That the moon landing footage was fake. Now, I'm not saying we didn't land on the moon, because I believe we did, but I'm telling you that footage with Neil Armstrong is phony. And another thing we have to realize is that NASA is spending billions of dollars sending probes to Mars, such as the Sojourner, to explore the deserts in Mars, to look for life or look for water, and beam back those images. Now, anybody could tell you, if you're spending billions and billions of dollars sending all these different probes out there just to photograph the same old terrain, which is just desert wasteland, that doesn't make any sense. This is because what you're seeing with those images being beamed back to Earth from Mars, from the probes, are phony images. They're either phony images or they're doctored, all right? The same way that the moon landing was staged, and images of the moon have been doctored to white out certain landscapes, like bases and things of that nature. Because this is what NASA is really about. It's about disinformation, painting a narrative of the universe. You see, their so-called search for extraterrestrial life is really to basically release information to you at certain times, periodically, because they've already made contact. If you saw the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that is actually based on a real incident. Do your research on that. So we already made contact. But let's understand something. Because we're dealing with scientists, these scientists who are left brain, and our ancestors who already pioneered the stars and traveled the stars through astral projection, projecting their consciousness. The consciousness actually is not located in any one fixed point in space and time. Henceforth, consciousness is everywhere. So you exist as a multidimensional being everywhere. So when I say projecting your consciousness to another planet, really that's not true, because there is no space in between you and Alpha Centauri. Do you understand? Because when you exist in the 5D realm, the mere thought makes it a manifestation instantaneously. Because in 5D, there's no space and time, and space and time are inseparable. It's called space-time. Now, NASA has a silly idea, being individuals of left brain thinking, that life, the only life that they can find that they're actually looking for, is a physical representation of life, meaning us, similar to us. So therefore, they look at the Earth as a case study and try to mirror that in what they're looking for through the Hubble deep space images and things of that nature. So they're looking for a planet that's Earth-like and that's located in the Goldilocks zone. So what is the Goldilocks zone? That's a zone that a planet has to be that's not too close to its sun and not too far. Because if it's too close, it's too warm, it's too hot. If it's too far, it's too cold. It has to be in that exact position, the Goldilocks zone, for it to support life. But in their ignorance, they're looking for physical life. Who said that life is physical? You see, we can only see. In other words, we have a limited perspective in terms of the light that we can see. We can't see the full spectrum of light. So what happens then is that you don't see beings that can exist number one, interdimensionally, or intradimensionally, or extra-dimensionally. So you're missing out on those three because you cannot see those wavelengths of light. But animals and very young children can, which is why you often see a dog barking into space or a child is staring off into something. You're like, what are you looking at? Because their third eye is open. Now, this gets deeper. Let's get into this. Not only is it silly for them to be looking for physical life or extraterrestrial life in the physical form, because they cannot conceive of life in a metaphysical form, such as we know that there are light beings, which is what my ancestry comes from, light beings. Light beings are very highly evolved beings, extraterrestrials. But the big secret on the planet is that they don't want you to know this. Western man has a problem with abstract thinking. And when you have a problem with abstract thinking, everything you see has to be concrete. Which is why, again, when they read the Bible, they read it as a history book instead of looking at it in terms of analogies and metaphors. So therefore, when they look for life, they look for concrete things such as physical beings or animals or plants. They cannot conceive of the metaphysical. This is why their representation of God has to be a physical entity. And this is why scientists wrestle with the idea of an intelligence, a supreme being that has no shape, no form, no physical representation. This is why they can't buy into the idea of a God. See, in ancient Kemet, there was no separation between science and religion, because they thought metaphorically and they thought abstractly they could conceive of a divine intelligence in a metaphysical form, one where you could not see, hear, or feel it. But just because it doesn't have a physical form doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Now, going back to NASA, their goal is to feed you disinformation. See, NASA has documentation, they have the evidence, they know that there's life on other planets, they've already made that contact. In fact, research what happened between a probe that was sent to Mars and went to the moons, Phobos and Deimos, 2 moons on Mars. And when the probe got too close to one of the moons, it was shot down. But see, you won't see that reported in mainstream media because it has been suppressed. Now they've just come out and said, oh, we found water on Mars. They knew there was water on Mars, but see, they have to continually just slowly feed the information out there for you to digest. They're controlling the flow of information. They doctor all of those Mars images. They're phony. You see that desert landscape and you see a little probe like going across the desert. Beep, 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 beep. Phony. Because any entity that spends billions of dollars to send a probe to continually take pictures of a desert terrain is wasting money, and they think we're idiots to believe that that's what they're doing. But the whole idea of sending the probes is just a cover story, because they are sending something out there, but they're not telling you what it is. Now, getting back to what I was saying before about the Goldilocks zone. Now, here's the thing that you need to understand. I'm going to tie this into something that's going to be very shocking. And if you don't already know this, get my book, The New Capital Ankh, the Secret to Manipulating Reality, because I really revealed this in that book, okay? Now follow me here. You have all of these people on YouTube, these New Age, occultists, spiritualists, talking about the multiverse, that we are multidimensional beings, okay? We exist in many, many different parallel worlds. But see, they're just regurgitating information that they've heard, okay? And this is what they do best, because when it comes to espousing spiritual, high-level spiritual information, the one thing that these spiritualists don't want to do is to give the credit to Africa. Because they get caught up in their yoga or their Chinese wisdom and sayings and proverbs and all that. They'll accept New Age spiritual knowledge from most cultures as long as it's not a Black culture. Because unfortunately, even that we're in 2019, Africa and Africans are still looked at as primitive and have contributed nothing to society. But they have produced the greatest civilizations on earth: Atlantis, ancient Kemet, Egypt, the Ethiopian Empire, which is still buried. The richest man on the planet in history comes out of Africa, not Bill Gates. The world's genius before Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Galileo, Imhotep came out of Africa, Kemet. Notice how you don't associate Egypt with Africa, because they say, oh, Egypt's in Northeast Africa. They kind of separated from Africa, you know? And they separated even further by calling it the upper and lower aspects of Egypt. But the world's knowledge and even the world's resources come out of Africa. And these occultists and these spiritualists, they want to get involved in everything under the sun except the spiritual wisdom of our ancestors that came out of Africa. And then when they do talk about Egypt and they do talk about Atlantis, they separate it, and then they kind of like whitewash it. But I digress. So what I want you to understand is that they're just regurgitating information, and they don't even know where the idea of the multiverse came from. And I am telling you that the multiverse came out of the idea of negating God or a divine intelligence and everything. It was scientists' way of getting away from the idea that there is a divine intelligence, a God. So then they came up with the theory of the multiverse. And now they're taking it a step further. See, they're moving away from the idea of God. They're taking it a step further by now saying that we don't live in the base reality, that we exist in a fractal, a self-replicating organism, that there are layers upon layers upon layers of reality, and the base reality is higher above, and we are merely basically like computer-generated, we're a computer-generated environment we're living in. That we are the creation of a higher being that's not God, but extraterrestrial. This is the simulation theory, that a race of extraterrestrials created a computer that created a simulation, which is us. So we're a simulation. And then we'll get to the point and advance enough to where we'll take our computers, like Sims and all that, and create an environment, another simulation, where the beings in that will get so advanced themselves, then they'll create a simulation, and it will go on and on and on and on and on. But what I'm trying to get to you is that they're slowly moving away with these theories from the idea of a divine intelligence. But there's a purpose to this. There is a purpose to this. Let me explain why they're doing this. But first off, I have to talk about the Big Bang, okay? Now, in the beginning, there was the Word. There was just I. So their theory is of the origin of everything. Suddenly, out of nowhere, from nothing, keep in mind, from nothing came a Big Bang. And from that Big Bang, existence came into manifestation. Now, they cannot explain how you have nothing, but something comes out of nothing. They can't explain that. They're doing their experiments in their laboratories. But now, the idea of from that nothing comes something, atoms and all the other particles. Now, here's the trick to this. From that sprang life, us on this planet Earth, Gaia, terra firma, right? Now, the scientists have already done the calculations. It is improbable, almost impossible, that from that Big Bang, life came into being. Impossible. The odds of that happening are staggering. Let me give you a metaphor. Because the way in which the particles were arranged to spring forth life, carbon-based beings, which is who we are, is astronomical. It will be the same as you taking the index cards and writing the alphabet, one letter of the alphabet on the index cards, and then mixing them up, shuffling them, and then throwing them up in the air and having them land, and then the cards say, "Hello, Kasank." Do you know the odds of that happening where you throw these cards in the air and randomly they come down and they say, "Hello, Kasank"? You would have to throw those cards off trillions of times before that would be able to happen. The likelihood of that happening is improbable. This is what's going on with the Big Bang. The likelihood as to the atoms and everything arranging themselves in such an order to spring forth life is just impossible. Let me read from the Ma'at, the 11 laws of God, for you to understand what I'm talking about here. What would be your conclusion if you traveled to a distant, uninhabited planet and found a stack of bricks exactly alike in size and weight, some set up according to a geometric series, while another group was arranged to make the letters of the alphabet? Would you not conclude that some intelligent being got there before you and was responsible for this arrangement? Somehow, scientists have missed the fact that following the Big Bang, the creation of elements proceeding according to strict mathematical rules, all elements are made up of the same components, just configured differently. The progression from one element to the next follows a strict mathematical pattern in which the underlying properties of each element are repeated in the element 8 places away. Repeated in the element 8 places away. This periodic pattern return of qualities is the basis of arranging the elements in the periodic table of the elements. We must also note that although each element is different, their structure all follow the same pattern. The fundamental unit of the element is the atom, and the atoms are composed of positively charged particles named protons, neutral particles named neutrons, which together occupy the center of the atom, the nucleus. Swirling around the nucleus are negatively charged particles named electrons. What I want to call to your attention next is the configuration of these electrons. They swirl around the nucleus in different orbits called shells. Now, I'm not going to go too much into all of that. All this is very interesting, but we are not interested in chemistry at this point. Remember your conclusion about those neatly arranged blocks you found on planet X. What we have here is the fact that long before a living thing could have come into being to create intelligence, there is something acting in an intelligent, very intelligent way in the creation of the atoms and the elements. One thing is for a pattern to occur as an organizing force inside the atom. Seeing it acting again as an organizing force outside the atom reinforces the idea of an organizing intelligence presence at work. So the mere fact that those atoms are arranged in such a specific way is an indication of an intelligence at work, repeating the same pattern. This takes us back to the idea of fractals and self-replicating organisms, such as a hologram. So scientists couldn't explain how all of that arranged itself in the exact permutation to create life just from that one Big Bang. So what did they do? They said, okay, you're right. From that one Big Bang, it's improbable for those elements to come together to manifest life forms. So let's look at the math. So what did they do? They said, well, it wasn't one Big Bang, there were a number of Big Bangs and many different universes. Therefore, we conclude that there was an infinite number of Big Bangs and there's an infinite number of parallel universes. So that is how they got away from the idea of a divine intelligence, creating life and organizing the electrons and the neutrons. Do you understand what I'm saying? They could not conceive of the fact that out of that one Big Bang, there was a divine intelligence that arranged things so that life could come into manifestation. So in order to do that, they had to create the idea of a multiverse. But see, these New Age occultists and these spiritualists are just regurgitating information because they don't know what they're saying. They don't know that they're negating God by supporting such a theory. And as I said before, they're now taking it to the next level by saying we are simulations. And we are not the base reality. The base reality is these ETs who have created computer simulation after computer simulation. And we are one of a multitude of computer simulations. My God. How could you have such twisted thinking? How could you not give credit to a divine being? Why do you must create theory after theory to get away from the fact that there is a God, that there is source? Do you see the intelligence that we're dealing with these left-brainers? Do you see the intelligence we're dealing with? And they know that they're limited in their perspective. They know that they're not integrated brain thinkers and that their third eye is not open. But they give you the perception that they're all powerful, that they're all knowing. We can send probes out to the farthest reaches of the universe. We can take images with the Hubble telescope. Now, going back to what I was saying about the Vatican, do you know that the most powerful telescope on the planet is named Lucifer? And it's owned by the Vatican. Did you also know that the Vatican has a humongous library similar to the Library of Alexandria at the bottom of the Vatican? And that for you to be able to go there to read any of those books is almost impossible. No commoners can go there and read those books because most of that knowledge and wisdom was stolen from ancient Africa, ancient Kemet. I'm talking about the Vatican, a religious institution that is responsible for slavery, that's responsible for harboring Nazi scientists, their sympathizers, for hiding the fact that there's extraterrestrial life in the universe because they can see it through their telescope. Now, here's the connection. Here's the connection. And I'm going to leave you with this. But my Magi's, please donate to the channel. It helps me to write more ebooks and to produce more shows. Let me pay my respects to the Magi's in the chat room. And please, if I get your name wrong, I apologize. Dozier, Hetepu, Vincent, Namaste, Everett, Haru Nefer, Pandu. Pandu 11, Hetep. Who else do we have here? All right. Ignomatic, Chris, Hetep. All right. Let's go back to what I was saying now. There's a reason why they don't want you to know that it's extraterrestrial life. There's a reason why they come up with these theories to get away from the idea of God. Because they don't want you to know who you truly are, which is you are a divine being, you are God, you're not human. Man just relates to pigmentation, man who has a pigmentation, man. But you are a divine being, you are consciousness. And our ancient ancestors knew this because they were abstract thinkers. They thought with the right brain. This is how they were able to build advanced civilization through integrated brain thinking, opening your third eye. And it was Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus who helped to build the pyramids, who helped to create the civilization and make it such an advanced civilization as Atlantis and ancient Kemet. You see, the ruling elite has control of the planet now. We're existing in a matrix, a prison planet. And when they were starting out on their endeavor to control the planet, they had to do so by capturing and hoarding the knowledge, by burning down the great library of Alexander. By going into the temples and stealing the knowledge of how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids. And then them telling you that we don't know how they built the pyramids. They didn't leave any record. The ancient Kemetic people were historians. They documented everything they did, their wars, their daily lives. Why would they not leave information about how they built the pyramids? Oh, well, now they come with a theory that aliens built the pyramids. They got to come with these different theories. You see, our ancestors were in direct contact with source, with the Akashic records. And when your civilization gets to such an advanced level of not only technologically, but morality, they had a high moral perspective on life. That was big to them, which is why they held in such high esteem the goddess Ma'at. So the ruling elite saw the fact that if they allowed those people who created those ancient advanced civilizations to ever rise up again, they would lose control of the planet. So they sought out on a campaign to exterminate people of color, indigenous people, because they were the ones who were the right brain thinkers. They were the progenitors of high culture, high civilization. They were the ones that held the female principle in such high regard. Because alongside Osir was Aset. And in ancient Kemet, you would never see the male without the female. They were always present and together. So the ruling elite started out in their campaign to eliminate those people of color. And what did they do? They created spirits, thought viruses, tulpas, ergomores, pendulums to do their deeds, to do the dirty work that would infect the minds of the population of what we call as Europeans or white people. That the Europeans would download this virus called racism and sexism, and then they would act upon that and work to go and do a campaign of rape and pillage of all so-called third world countries. Because if the truth ever got out to the masses of the population that you are God, everything would change. In fact, there would be a revolt, a planetary revolt, a global revolt, because people would realize they have been duped and we have been living in a construct. They cannot allow you to understand the true nature of who you are and the true nature of what has happened in history. That the space-time continuum has been disrupted. That what we think of as the past as primitive and pagan was really advanced. So NASA and SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Life, which is listening for any type of intelligent code or language from beings in outer space. And they've already received it. And even Nikola Tesla has admitted that he's received it, but they suppress this information. But I don't want you to forget that you as a magi, you as God, man, God, woman, have access to those extraterrestrial beings. By going within to the so-called subconscious realm, you can make contact with them. And they're open and receptive to communicating with you. This is why things like DMT, ayahuasca are outlawed, because these medicines will take you into that realm so you can make contact with the intra-dimensional beings, the extra-dimensional beings. So NASA has to put out this propaganda, this narrative about searching for physical intelligence, which they've already made contact with, but they won't tell you that. So they have to spoon feed you or disseminate the information that supports the narrative. And remember, you cannot discover anything. I don't care what they're looking at with their telescopes. We've discovered that this planet has a storm, an eye of a storm that has been in existence for thousands of years. We've discovered that this planet is a gas giant. We've discovered that this planet is all water. You cannot discover that. Everything already exists. You merely shift to a certain frequency so that you can interact with it. You cannot create anything. Everything is already is. We are living in abundance. You can neither add to it or subtract from it. So you're not discovering anything. And there is a trick to this, because the more you look for something, the more it aligns with your expectations. This is why in the medical industry, they have the double-blind placebo test, because reality conforms to the expectation of the observer. So whatever these scientists are looking for, if they have an expectation of finding it, they will. In the same way, there's no real truth. Whatever you believe, this construct, this matrix, whatever you want to call it, will support it and feed it back to you. If I believe that the people I work with are bad people, evil people that gossip, then that will manifest. I will shift to that parallel world where the people I work with are gossipers and bad people. If I want to believe that the world, there is an external world, it's an objective realm, then it will manifest. It is energetic, it is dynamic, it is constantly responding to your strongest thoughts and beliefs, and it supports that. This is why you are all powerful. This is why you can create the reality that you exist in. The more you look, the more reality confirms what you're looking for. It aligns with your belief. So I just want you to understand that when you see these programs, when you see these news clips, when you see these moon landing footage, it's all a smoke and mirrors. It's all just theatrics. NASA knows the truth, but they don't want you to know the truth. This is why they have to keep the narrative going. Let us look for life. We must find the Goldilocks zone, a planet that exists within the Goldilocks zone. We must find physical life. Now watch what they do. They're going to say, okay, we found water. Now they're going to say, we found simple cellular life forms. They're going to feed it to you slowly, slowly, controlling the flow of information. And the one thing they will not do is to tell you that there's a divine superior intelligence out there that's controlling everything. They will invent theory after theory to get away from that. Because to admit that there's a divine intelligence that's an abstract being, a metaphysical being, is to admit that our ancient ancestors got it right. And then you would see through the veil. You would see through this thing they called racism, this thing they called sexism, that they created to divide the planet and to have brother against brother, sister against sister. You would see through all that. You would see that you're not the physical body, you're consciousness. You would see through all that BS that they've created in the universities and that they teach and that they proselytize about. You would become awakened to your power, and you would try to enact what you want in terms of this reality. You would change everything to conform to a more conducive reality, to a more loving and peaceful existence. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, my beloved. Get back to the ancient knowledge and wisdom of your ancestors. I am so thankful of this book series from the author Ra'u Nefa Amen, the Metu Netta book series. Get these books. They dive deep into the nature of your being, into the deities, the spirits, the different dimensional realms. Resurrect that ancient knowledge from our ancestors and practice that. And when you do so, you will regain power. You will become a living God. And you will remember that in the beginning, there was just you. You were alone. That you created yourself. As the ancient Kemetic scriptures say, I was alone. I brought myself into being. That's some powerful stuff. You've got to be a powerful God to bring yourself into being. I want to thank you for listening to this message. And I want to thank the Magi's for contributing, because I see you guys have written some really good stuff. Again, please donate to the channel. This is Kasank Ma Keparu, son of Ma'at and Tuhuti. My aunt is the beautiful goddess Heteru. Till my next broadcast, Amin Ra.